Well, but monsters as they are, what would you do with them? The answer is short and at hand. Hang them for whatever they deserve. I would have no new tortures invented, nor any new death devised. In this, I think, I show moderation. Let them only be hanged, but hanged speedily. Churchill and Gordon, Cato's letter number 3.
Cato's letter number 3, November 19th, 1720. So ain't nothing changed.
Right?
304 years and ain't nothing changed. But the only thing that has changed is they weren't afraid to write that.
Right.
That was published in a London newspaper. That wasn't just something they wrote in a journal or something secret. This was published as every week in a London newspaper.
And
If you publish that today, you will have a knock by the Secret Service or Homeland Security.
for sure. Yeah, we know that's true. And and um and honestly, thank goodness for, a semblance of English freedom at that time.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I guess we should make our little announcement.
Yeah,
here.
let's do this. Let's do this. Joe Wolverton, Mike Levitt, and If Love Remains, Teacher of Liberty. However, this is a side project, a fun project where we are going to be getting your mind straight. I think that's the right way to put this. Like, we're going to try to tell you the things so that you're thinking properly about liberty.
Well, just thinking new thoughts, thinking the thoughts that made our founding fathers the men that they were.
Right.
Right. How did they come to see the world as they saw it, and not only that, but just have fun talking about other things. But I think the thrust of it is to restore to people the feeling that not only something can be done, but should be done, and maybe what should be done.
Yeah.
And the idea, we're calling it return to tradition.
Turn to tradition.
Because we would like to make tyrants birds again. You know, we'd like to be able to buy guillotines on Amazon.
We like that plan.
You know, all that kind of stuff.
But we will take the Churchill and Gordon stand of
let's not make any. Yeah, let's be merciful and just hang them quickly.
Yeah,
we're not going to devise new tortures. We don't need to do that.
Right.
But the point is, none of this can happen without having your mind squared away the way Churchill and Gordon, Algernon Sidney, and then the generation of our founding fathers that read these guys.
Right.
I mean, Cato's letters, for example, Algernon Sidney, these were mother's milk to our founding fathers. These are the things they read. And not only that, of course, they had a biblical bedrock upon which they were built, and they believed these things. And they really thought of these things as real, as true, and it motivated them. They recognized through their study of things like this that there comes a time when you've tried talking and you've tried reasoning with people that won't be reasoned with. And so we're just going to try and restore that, try to help get people thinking differently about what we can do.
And these are dangerous thoughts, not just because it may end in danger for tyrants, but they're dangerous thoughts because we've been afraid to think them for a long time.
Yeah, and it's not fomenting violence.
No.
Because, it reminds me of the thing that people get wrong about Machiavelli. They're always like, Machiavelli was power at any cost. No, and that's not what he said. If you've read The Prince, if you've read The Art of War, if you've read Discourses on Livy, you will know that Machiavelli's point was the only way to have a peaceful, prosperous society and a well-governed society is for virtuous people to elect virtuous rulers.
Yeah.
Machiavelli was a Republican, small r. He was not someone that thought, if you can get power, get it no matter what it takes. That is not what he believed. And so this is not a podcast to foment violence. This is a podcast to say we're nowhere near being able to do that because we're not educated and virtuous enough to make a correct call on that.
Right. And the truth is, if we want to prevent violence, the best way to prevent violence is to have a free society with an educated people, so that those who have any kind of office or authority in those communities will fear the violence that would come should they overstep their
Yeah,
rights.
there should not need to be any violence. There should just be. It's like Tacitus when he talks about the Chaucians in ancient Germany. This tribe in ancient Germany. He's like everybody feared them, but because they were so good, that they were so just all the time, everybody feared the Chaucians. He's like, but the Chaucians never plundered. They never took part in other people's wars. They never fomented war, but they kept themselves well trained, well prepared, and if anybody ever attacked them, they wish they hadn't.
And I think that this is a problem with how we learn history. Is that when we learn history in schools, we're often taught, the great men, the great empires, the great, and all of those men, all of those empires, gained their power through force, violence, and so we don't
Fraud.
fraud, right? And so we don't learn about the virtuous leaders, those in Germania, those who because honestly, there's not much to talk about.
Yeah,
They
they
were
should.
free, they were prosperous, they were peaceful. Like,
Yeah, I mean, you can read it. Just go to Germania, read about the Chaucians, and that's every time when I teach Germania, we can talk about that at another time. But whenever I teach Germania, I'm like, look at this description of the Chaucians, and isn't that who we should be?
hmm
And I remember one time I taught the kids would tag all the whiteboards in the school with "Be Chaucian." Because it's we should be Chaucian. We should be, and every leader, like you said, every political servant should be afraid of the people.
yeah,
They should all be afraid of us, and that fear should keep them in line. Now, ultimately, I suppose the greatest situation would be there would be no fear because their virtue would prevent them from ever exceeding the limits of the authority they're granted by the
sure,
people. That they wouldn't. I'm not like I didn't have a curfew growing up because my parents never worried about me staying out and getting up to no good. I didn't have a curfew. So it would be nice to never have to have a leader fearful of the people because that leader himself is so virtuous, being tyrannical would never cross his mind.
right. And it would be within the culture that that leader would never see himself above the people, but instead would see himself as a servant, as somebody providing a service to keep them out of danger, to keep them out of war, so that the rest of the community, rest of his clan, the rest of his family can be prosperous, free, and able to do the things that truly that God put us on this earth to do, which
Yeah,
is
I
be
mean, have
prosperous,
a
free, and
leader.
happy.
Yeah, have a leader that we would reelect every year or every 2 years, whatever, that we would reelect because this guy, he he respects the sanctity of private property. He knows that the only way to be prosperous is to be peaceful, and that he keeps us out of foreign wars. He keeps the government out of business, right? That the government the sole purpose for existence is to make us freer,
Right.
right? We take a bit of our natural sovereignty, cede it for a limited time to a representative, because that way, that time that we would have spent securing our own rights, he can do on our behalf, leaving us more time to pursue our happiness.
Right.
That would be the ideal situation.
It-
And it can be done. And that's part of the thing. Return to tradition. We can get this done. We really
yeah,
can do it.
we can.
But it's one of those things you've got to, as Apple once famously said, think different. You got to think different.
We do indeed.
You got to think different.
And part of that, and I love that we're starting with Cato's letters number 3. I think it'll take it not a lot, but maybe a little bit of background to understand what they're talking about. But all this stuff I'm going to put in the show notes so that you guys could read yourself. You need to read this stuff yourself. It's good for us to.
And let me just say this: if you want to take, because a lot of people, not a lot of people, but well, yeah, there are many people that say to me, Joey, you're always preaching about Cato's letters. And I get fired up when you explain them, but when I read it, I don't understand it. So let me suggest to you something that I tried the other day to see if it would actually work, and it did work. I would suggest to you taking, copying, going to Cato's letters, use the link in the show notes, go to Cato's letters, copy all the text of letter number 3, for example. Go to Chat GPT and say, rephrase this using more contemporary language, or make this easier to understand, or summarize this in uh, more relatable English, or whatever you want to use. And I did it. I didn't do it with number 3, but I can't remember which one I did it with. Actually, I think it was 14. And I put a letter in there and I said, hey, reword this using more contemporary English. And it kicked it out. And it was, yeah, it just read like it'd been written yesterday. If you have a problem understanding, if you don't, it's best not to drink downstream. But if you do have difficulty understanding it, it's better to drink a little downstream than not drink at all.
Right.
So take this, copy paste, Chat GPT, put this in easier language, bada boom, bada bing. Then you can read it and understand it.
And as the kids like to say, when you do that with AI, you're training the AI. So
It's true.
I'm not saying, but we if you want a liberty loving AI,
Yeah, you might be changing
it's
the robot into a tyrant hater.
that's right.
There's nothing wrong with that.
Nothing wrong with
The
that
more,
at
the
all.
better. All right,
Absolutely.
so we're doing number 3. Yeah.
We are doing number trace.
Now, the title of this one, The Pestilent Conduct of the South Sea Directors with the Reasonable Prospect of Public Justice, written by Thomas Gordon. Like we said before, Saturday, November 19th, 1720. I guess if you want to know what the South Sea Directors are, think 1720s version of the Federal Reserve.
Right.
It's essentially what it is. Not stroke for stroke, perfect analogy, not that. But you can, if you want to think, what was he taught? What was the tyranny being carried out? The crown was essentially granting power over England's economy to a private corporation. So much like our government did to the Federal Reserve.
Right.
So that's what's happening. And so, just like with us, the Federal Reserve has let us boom, bust into, you know, 30 whatever trillion dollars in debt. That happened to England. And the board of directors, just like will happen to us, and just like happens to Exxon and to GM and every bank, every giant bank, they kept getting bailed out while the people became poorer and poorer and poorer. And just like that, that happened in England in the early 1700s, just like it's happening to us today. And so Trenchard and Gordon, particularly their early letters, were written to say this is the most extreme act of inhumane violence to allow these tyrants and to allow the people behind the tyrants, the money behind the tyrants, to get away with all of this destruction.
Right. And I think also when you have that in mind, it helps clarify some of the reading. When they're talking about things, and we'll get into it, but when they're talking about things like a equal distribution, almost it can sound almost socialistic at times, but you have to understand that they're talking about um, public funds and public, money being basically stolen for the quote public good that is in turn is just used to serve the
Yeah,
good
just
of
enriches the people
right.
who are sitting on that board of directors. So, and the board of directors were using that money to get sympathetic, obedient politicians
Right.
elected to office.
Yeah.
And so it was exactly like it is now.
Yep.
So we start out, and in typical Trenchard and Gordon style, it's like, and the first paragraph is really powerful because you got to put yourself in the mind of what's being done to us. Think of yourself financially, your financial position, particularly at this tax season where so many people are writing a check to the government for the pleasure of being allowed to work, right? Just think about that, right? And think about how many million Americans are in that position. How many millions of Americans can't pay rent, can't support their family, but somehow we send billions to Ukraine, right? You can't buy groceries, your prices increase by 20%, but somehow we still make rich men in foreign countries even richer. And this is what was happening to them. And so he says, a man robbed in his house or on the highway receives from the law all possible satisfaction. He has the restitution of his goods again, where it can be made. He has the life of the offender, if he can be apprehended. And there is a plentiful reward given for every such apprehension. By this salutary method, vengeance is at once taken for the crime committed and a terrible example made of its author to prevent its repetition. So if someone breaks in your house and steals your stuff, you try to get the law will allow you to try to get your stuff back. The law will try to apprehend the thief, right? You'll get your stuff back. The thief will go to jail, right? And the idea being you get restitution, you get your stuff back, you get restitution, he gets punished. And the idea is to discourage other people from stealing from people.
Right. Right. And this is called just natural law. I mean, we could be talking about the law of England, we could talk about the American law. We could talk about any law, but this is just plain old natural law. I am a human being, you are a human being, and so this is how we conduct ourselves.
And again, the law used to enforce that.
Mm-hmm.
That if I stole from a man, I recognize that the law would punish me. If I had his stuff, the law would take it from me and give it back to him.
And probably with some interest and some restitution.
Something.
Yeah.
There would be some way for the law to punish thieves and return the victim of theft back to his original condition.
Right. And so the purpose of law is really to institute justice, like no more, no less. And this is why is that so important in the context of this? Why all of a sudden is he bringing up, that this is what law is, and this is how, we deal with robbers, on this thing that we're talking about, this private company.
I mean, it says, "'Tis the law to secure us what we have, preserve what we are. A free people are kept so by no other means than equal distribution of property. Every man who has a share of property having a proportional share of power in the first." In other words, you can't run something unless you own part of that thing. I don't get to vote on Apple's policies because I don't own any stock in Apple. So if you own property, the government necessarily, you should have a say in that government. And the way that it's always been done is as property owners. Now, you can think of it as owning a house, but it's more than that. Having a job is being a property owner. So you should have a say in the making of the law, and the law should only exist to protect your money from being stolen by a thief, period. And to punish the thieves so that no one else gets the idea that we can get away with stealing.
Right.
That happens if you're an individual, but what happens if you are a congressman, a president, a governor, a judge, right? Nothing happens to you. And so they have this, my favorite, and you can tell me yours, but my favorite paragraph is the one that says, so he's asking, what progress we have lately made in England toward such a blessed state of confusion and misery by the credulity of the people. Credulity means easy to believe. You're easily led to believe things that aren't true. So he's like, this is what's happening in England. And this is how we've ended up with confusion and misery. First, we have the credulity of the people easily fooled, throwing their all upon the mercy of base-spirited, hard-hearted villains, mischievously trusted with a power to undo them, is too manifest from the woeful condition that we are in. There's no way that we in the United States are in the condition we're in if it were not for people that believe the Republicans will save us. No, the Democrats will save us. The credulity of the people and the fact that politicians from both parties across the board are base-spirited, hard-hearted, and You've trusted them with power to make law, and they're abusing the law to steal from you. That is a fact.
You know, I talked to, I I'm reflecting on our last episode where we talked about the delusion of the people, you know,
Mhm.
and how,
Yeah.
you know, how that happens and how that's so dangerous. Um, and this is really, you know, this is kind of the point. As I was I listened to Piers Morgan do an interview the other day, and he had on a Republican, a Democrat, and a Libertarian guy, and they were going back and forth, and it was just so fascinating to hear Piers Morgan, of all guys, saying, you know, Donald Trump, I mean, he's not really a demon. He's just doing this, you know, bad stuff. Blah,
Mhm.
blah. And then the guy immediately, the Democrat, the guy in favor of Democrat, no, he is such a demon. He did this. He's such a demon. And then the Republican guy, you want to talk about a demon? Let's talk about Joe Biden.
Right.
But you know, it goes to what you're talking about as far as, um, when we're at each other's throat and we don't see what the real enemy is and we don't understand that they are against us, doesn't matter what the R or the D or whatever the
Yeah.
label is that they have, that they are enriching themselves on our backs.
Right. And that leads to the woeful condition we are in.
Right.
And then he continues, the ruin is general. Everybody is suffering. The ruin is general. Every man has the miserable consolation to see his neighbor undone. In other words, at least I don't have as bad as that guy. That's the best you can say. I'm better off than that guy. That's the miserable consolation. For as to that class of ravens whose wealth has cost the nation its all, as they are manifest enemies to God and man, no man can call them his neighbor. In other words, the politicians, they're not your neighbor because all they do is constantly steal from you. They steal from you. They illegally tap your phone. They illegally surveil you, right? They illegally take money from you that you have earned. They illegally make you pay for the privilege of living on land that you purchased, right? They illegally lock you up for failing to obey a regulation that never was passed by the lawmaker. So these ravens are enemies to God and man and are nobody's neighbor. They are rogues of prey. They are stock jobbers and they are a conspiracy of stock jobbers. In other words, they're just there to make money off you. They're using you the way a shepherd would use sheep. All they're doing is making money off you. They are not only individually stock jobbers, they are conspiring to do it. A name which carries along with it such a detestable and deadly image that it exceeds all human invention to aggravate it. You can think of no worse title than the title we give them of tyrant. That nor can nature, with all her variety and stores, furnish out anything to illustrate its deformities. There's nothing in nature as deformed and depraved as these tyrants. Nay, it gains visible advantage by the worst comparisons you can make. Your terror lessens when you liken them to crocodiles and cannibals who feed for hunger on human bodies. They don't even do it because they're hungry, they do it for sport, they do it to make themselves wealthier. They do not, no politician cares about you. None of them, not a single one of them cares about you. They care about holding on to power. And if you're a way to keep power and to have access to greater wealth, they'll pretend to care about you long enough to keep that avenue to wealth and power open to them. But the moment that you're expendable, you're nothing more than a speed bump in that avenue. They are worse than anything in nature. You see these nature shows and they're like, we would advise caution in watching this because some of these scenes are disturbing. You know, when the lion just gets on that zebra and just, he's like, there's nothing in nature as detestable as a tyrant because they're not doing it because they have to survive. They're doing it simply out of depravity of spirit.
Yeah. And the lie, or that depravity gets, it gets sunk deeper and deeper and deeper, so that lies have to be told in order to uphold their authority, and that continues to grow and grow. So they have to spin doctor and create fear in the people, and all of a sudden now we're, you know uh they create an environment where there's actual conversations about, are men and women. I mean, this whole environment, I mean, trust me, this environment that we're living in, this postmodern craziness, is due to a way to take our eye off the ball of what these tyrants are doing.
Yeah, I mean, who do you hear calling tyrants enemies of God and man?
Nobody today.
You hardly, the only people you hear calling people tyrants is like, oh, this guy's a tyrant because he backs this policy. Nobody even knows the damn definition of it
Right.
anymore, right? It's just a word to say, meaning I don't agree with that politician, so he's a tyrant.
Right.
That's not the definition of tyrant. I mean, it could be. That could be part of what a tyrant is. But you have to understand that to these people, to Trenchard and Gordon, to all of these people that we talk about, to them, a tyrant is someone who places himself above God. Because God says, here are the commandments. I want you to keep them.
Mhm.
I will reward you for keeping them. But he never comes down and forces us. There's never been an instant where God tried to use force or fraud to make you keep a commandment. And he's God. So what you're doing is when you obey or comply to a tyrant, you are willingly placing him above God because you are granting to that man a privilege that even God himself does not take for himself. That is to say, to force you to obey his will. And at least, if you were forced to obey God's will, at least you would know it was perfect. At least you would know it was merciful and holy. Can you say anything like that about any of these petty tyrants that force you to obey them at the fear of incarceration or indebtedness? Can you say that about them? No, they are forcing you to do things that enrich them or enrich this class of ravens who are their co-conspirators overseas. None of the No one's ever been bailed out except giant corporations. And where did the money bail them out? Either stolen from us or created by the Federal Reserve. And either way, we pay the price.
Right. It's either stolen from us or from our children.
Right. And if the Federal Reserve prints up the money, that just creates inflation, which is a secret tax. Right. But no one shows anymore. Nobody outside of us that tyrants are an enemy to God.
Right.
And that God has specifically in the Bible commanded us that to destroy those who are his enemies. We have now we don't have to necessarily again use violence to destroy them, but we sure as hell need to stop obeying them.
Right.
Right? I'm like we talked about Etienne de la Boissy. He says, I'm not asking you to lay hands on them, but please stop obeying them.
Let's start there. That's a great.
Please.
Well, because that removes all their power. Their only
And if
power.
it doesn't, then they're the ones taking it to the next level.
Right. Right. Yeah. Because ultimately their power is our obedience. It's, it's so good. This stuff is
They
so
served,
powerful.
I mean, they're just saying these politicians,
Oh,
they served a whole people as Satan served Job.
right.
Right.
And this is why and I love you that you're bringing up the Bible and God and these things, because it is perfectly righteous to call out the fall of tyrants. It's perfectly righteous. There is nothing eh, to do anything otherwise is to not call yourself a Christian or a God or a believer in God.
I mean, to otherwise is accept that you are less than human because
Yeah.
otherwise you are not created in the image of God. You are not doing as God did, casting out the evil spirits. You are allowing them not only to exist, but you are voting for them. You are willfully going into a little booth and voting for someone who you could go to his campaign webpage. And in the things I promised to do in the first 100 days, or whatever they call that little tab on their website, you go through there and I challenge you, take your favorite tyrant, go to his campaign website, print out the, hey, this is what I promised to do if I'm elected, and take a red pen and put an X next to everything that he promises to do that the Constitution permits him to do. You will have a blank page
Yep.
because they promise to do things. As president, I will blah, blah, blah. As president, they don't have that power. As congressman, I will. As senator, I will. Whatever, fill in the blank. They don't have that authority. So when you go in and you're, I'm going to go vote for this guy. It's cool if you're going to vote for a tyrant, but you got to cop to it. And you got to realize that, like Cicero said, someday there's going to come a day when we're going to remember all of y'all who voted for tyrants, and we don't want any of that anymore.
Right.
So if you willfully go in there and you're, hey, I'm supporting this party because they're the lesser of two evils, that means to the rest of us, you willingly vote for evil. Because I don't trust you. I don't trust any human very much to be able to distinguish between grades of evil, degrees of depravity, because we are all fallen and depraved. So when it comes to you saying to yourself, I'm just going to hold my nose and vote for the lesser of two evils. So you're saying they're both evil. So you're saying you willingly voted for evil. Well, just remember that there will be an accounting for that. Simple as that. Just remember that. Or do like we're suggesting, like Trenchard and Gordon are suggesting. Stop obeying them. Realize they have no real power over you unless you continue to feed the beast. And remember, they aren't doing it because they're mistaken. They're not even doing it because out of a good heart and they think, this is a great policy and really going to help. They don't care. They are doing it because they are depraved servants of the devil, period.
Yeah. And it's wise to talk about them as monsters, to talk about them as ravens. Um, it's wise because, as you mentioned earlier, these are not your neighbors. These people are not the community. They are not citizens. And I think, written in a more modern tone, anybody who reads Anatomy of the State by Murray Rothbard, you'll realize that the state is something different than it's, because when we talk about the state, it's not a geographical location.
Right.
It's not a person. It's a thing in and of itself. And those and a tyrant is the same thing. It's something in and of itself, and it's got to be destroyed.
And they even say, they're like, okay, they're having like a false dialogue, a pretend dialogue with themselves. They're like, okay, well, if this is all true, Mr. Gordon, then why haven't we seen these people strung up? And he says, God knows the answer, protected by party and by money. Faction, meaning political party on one side and riches on the other, have made a lane for these great criminals to escape. If you don't know that that's what's happening now, this podcast probably isn't for you. If you don't recognize that party, which are private corporations, the Democratic Party, the Republic, those are private corporations who run your elections, right? If you don't realize that party and money leave avenues open for the escape of these criminals, you're not paying attention. And you're one of these people who will believe anything you're told. Whether you're one of the MSNBC, I believe everything they say, or Fox, I believe everything they say, you're still believing nonsense and you're part of the problem. And you are what keeps these avenues open for the escape of these criminals. Because if we didn't have these parties where everyone has to, like, at the end of the day, I got to be faithful to my group.
Right.
There, do you know how it blew my mind when I first went to vote when I was 18, and you could vote what they called straight party ticket?
Right.
I was like, what? So I remember asking my dad after I voted, I'm like, why did they have that thing that said straight party ticket? He's like, oh, well, if you want to go in there and just vote for all the Republicans, you can just hit one button, or all the Democrats and just hit one button. If you don't want to be bothered to actually evaluate the character of the men running for office, then you can just say, I want all the R's to win, or I want all the D's to win.
Mhm.
And again, that record is being written down. And those people too will be called to account, because what you're saying is, just, I don't care that you're my master, just be a kind master,
Right.
right? I don't
Oh,
care.
and by the way,
Lower my tax rate, daddy.
this goes back to what we were talking about before with the discourse on civil disobedience. I think
Mm.
one of my favorite parts of that is when he's talking about these men who collude or get in bed with these people thinking they're going to be rich, and he makes the point that don't you realize that that's all from stolen money too, that's all, like, you are part of the worst conspiracy.
Yeah, when you weaponize your vote because you're like, I don't have
Yeah,
the balls to go steal from my neighbor, but guess what? I'm gonna elect a politician who promises to do it for me.
exactly.
Gutless, gutless coward. Come steal, man. If you want part of my money, come get it. Come try to have the guts to say, I don't want to work for a living. I want to steal from my neighbor who is working, and come do that. At least then you may be a rogue and you're a thief, but at least
You're an honest one.
at least you're not a coward,
Right.
right? Because the cowards are these people that are electing to weaponize their votes. Because I want politicians to steal for me so they can make it the law. So I can use the law to, oh, what did I say? The law? Politicians? What made the balloons go up? You, I don't know. Like,
They're loving
something I did and the balloons went off, right?
they're loving your preaching there.
They're loving it. But that's the point. You are weaponizing your vote,
Yeah.
and you're saying, I'm too much of a wuss to steal from people, but I want the government to do it for me. And this is what creates these people. This is that credulity. This is that effeminacy that Trenchard and Gordon are saying create the situation that make us all miserable.
Yep. You asked me. I don't know if this is my very favorite paragraph, but I love this paragraph.
Let's see it.
It's, this nation has formerly been bought and sold, but arts are used to blind the people's eyes, and the effects of the treachery were not immediately felt. And we know that the resentment of the vulgar never follows from the understanding of their reflection, but from their feeling. A pickpocket may tickle a plain fellow's ear till he's got his purse, but if he feel it going, he will knock the thief down. We have felt our pockets picked, and we know who have done it. Vengeance abides them.
Yes, sir.
Mm.
Vengeance abides them.
And they'll abide you too if you don't stand up. Stand up. Return to tradition, man. I mean,
I mean, it's like someone asked me the other day, literally, genuinely asked, what, how did the founding fathers respond to taxes? I was like, are you serious? How did they respond? I don't know, burning down the homes of tax collectors,
right.
tarring and feathering tax collectors, running them out on a rail. I don't know, all kinds of ways. All kinds of ways that, mind you, after they tried to say, hey, y'all don't have this authority, and England's like, yeah, we don't care. What are you going to do about it? Well, then they show. But we don't do that. You see,
Right.
we've been taught that that's wrong and that's against the law.
Impolite.
That's
It was
against
bad we
the
threw
law.
those snowballs at those poor soldiers.
Yeah, those, man, that is terrible. It's just, it's not polite.
No.
It's not law abiding. You know, there's There are proper ways to protest, Mike.
Right.
Gosh, why
I
was
love my freedom as long as it's legal.
my legal freedom? I am told that some of them have the face to pretend, so these tyrants, that they ought not be put to death. But we hope the legislature will effectively convince them. We hope that the legislature will effectually convince them that this partiality to themselves is groundless. No, in fact, you do deserve what you're going to get.
Right.
All their hopes of safety must consist in their money. And without question, they will try to make the wages of their villainy protect their villainy. In other words, guys, if we could elect legislators who refuse to participate, if we elected legislators who were men, who were virtuous, who were good, they would make it a crime to do what the tyrants are doing to us. It would be, and Churchard and Gordon has a section here, we'll probably get to it someday, where they have a letter saying, what do you give, what kind of punishment do you give to a petty thief? Well, if someone steals from the whole nation, shouldn't the punishment be even worse? Like, you
You
know how
think.
here in letter 3, he says, don't invent any new ways.
Yeah.
There's one of the letters where they say, you know what? Let's invent new ways. They're like, never mind what I said earlier. They really
I'm
do.
revising.
They really do. In one of the later letters, they're like, you know what? Forget that.
Somebody get out the Iron Maiden. Come on.
These crimes are so gross and of such grander degree. We need to invent new ways to punish these tyrants because they deserve the degree of their crimes deserves some sort of novel way to punish them.
Well, it logically makes sense. I mean, if we take that very first paragraph where they say, you know, if somebody robs you, that they should be apprehended, you should get your stuff back, and then it says, and there is a plentiful reward given for every such apprehension. By this salutary method, vengeance is at once taken for the crime committed, and a terrible example made of its author to prevent its repetition. You know, if we want to
Right.
stop the repetition of tyrants, we have to make it so awful for them.
Well, what if the punishment for stealing from somebody, you got to keep the stuff and all you had to say was sorry.
Right.
That's it. If you get caught stealing and you get convicted of stealing, right? And the harshest penalty you get is you have to go say you're sorry to that guy. You don't have to give the stuff back. You don't have to go to jail. You don't pay a fine. You just have to go say sorry to that guy. Because what do politicians do? When these things go wrong, well, that was the other party were being obstructionist,
Right.
or we didn't have all the facts, or we were being kept from this knowledge, or the Russians were interfering, or no, it was the Koreans, or it was the Chinese, or there's always if there's no real threat, we just invent one. But it's always someone else's fault that you got that this or that thing went wrong. And that's all they do. They don't have to give any of our money back, right? What about Afghanistan? We were there for 20 years, billion after billion after billion of American treasure, over 3,000 American lives lost fighting the Taliban. And at the last day we were there, who did we give Afghanistan back to? The Taliban. Now, so they
Along with
stole
billions of dollars of more weapons that we
right.
just left there.
They stole for 20 years. They killed over 3,000 people. I'm putting 2 up and they're doing balloons.
Wow.
What? Peace? Is it peace? Oh, wow. That's wrong.
That's getting creepy.
But they did all that. And guess what? All they had to do is what? Sorry. Right? And sometimes not even that.
Not even that. Yeah. It's
Just, but there's no punishment.
Aren't you glad I'm here because I'm the one that got us out?
They need to be punished. Because only, like they said, you would think of that for any common thief.
And there is a straight line. It's not like we can't find this out. We know who sent the people who sent our men to war. We know who
Right.
stole
There's
the
voting
money.
records.
We know who We know where the money went to. We know which companies profited from
And
them.
think of how depraved some of these people are. Think of, you talk about pedophiles.
Mm.
There, some of these people in office are depraved. And not only do we allow depraved people to be in office, we pay them a salary and we typically give power to the person who pays the most for it. Who is the
Mm.
last person you want to give power to? Someone willing to do anything to get it.
Right.
Well, this next bit, ordinary, if we could get virtue back in our people, if we could get virtuous, honest men in office, it says, then ordinary channels of justice couldn't be stopped by bags of money or by partnership in original guilt, right? Because that's what happens now. You get someone like Biden. Why isn't he in jail for what happened with uh, Ukraine, with the energy company? Why isn't he in jail? Why isn't Hunter Biden in jail? Why isn't Hillary Clinton in jail? Why aren't any of these people in jail when we know they did these things? Why are they not? Bags of money and partnership in the guilt.
Yep.
I got a lot of money and I am potentially guilty as well. So I'm going to do everything I can to keep these people out of prison. So bags of money. So we have a situation where the channels of justice are stopped, meaning, dammed up by bags of money, partnership in the original go. But then he said, what if you had a situation where the people were virtuous and the legislators were virtuous? He said, then the enraged, the abused people might be prompted by their uppermost passion and having their resentment heightened by disappointment, might, it is to be feared, have recourse to extraordinary ways that are often successful, though never justifiable. So, right now, even though we know that these things would be successful, we they're just considered not justifiable because, well, you just have to vote the bums out.
Right.
Well, the bums change, but the theft never does.
Right.
We haven't been. Do you? We have not been. We have, or let's put it this way: we have been at war somewhere on this planet since the beginning of the 20th century. World War One, World War Two, Spanish American War, World War One, World War Two, Korea, Vietnam, Grenada, Panama, Nicaragua, Somalia, Iraq, Kuwait, Afghanistan.
and that doesn't even
And that
count the
doesn't even count the
proxy wars
right. That
that
doesn't
we.
count the proxy wars. The fact that doesn't count the fact that we're, the de facto army of Saudi Arabia and, murdering thousands of Yemenis, that we're
Right.
nothing more than the servants to the Saudi king, right? We've not had a day of peace in this country since the beginning of the 19th, since right before the 1900s. But you think about what occurred all at the same time. The
The
popular election of the Senate,
right.
right? Throwing the states out of the mix completely, income tax, Federal Reserve, World War One,
Right.
federal control of education. All of that
Great
happened within like
Depression.
all of that. Well, those first things all those things happened within a matter of a couple of years of each other.
It's true.
And then we're like, well, there's reason to. No, the reason is because the people that have carried on this government are knowingly serving the prince of this world. That is to say, the devil. They're knowingly doing it. And for you to sit there and vote for them because they're the lesser of two evils, somewhere Satan is laughing his head off because of the credulity of a so-called Christian nation.
And if anybody who looks into any of the history of any of those items that you talked about will know the kind of secrecy, the kind of workarounds, the kind of illegality that had to happen just to get those things, quote lawful, so that now we're under the arm of, the now all our money's printed by a private bank. Now all of our And
Wait till it's made to we have nothing but electronic media.
oh yeah, I mean, and they can turn it off at any time. Anytime they see this podcast, oh, Mike Levitt,
Oh,
you're
you mean like they said that um, if the people will tamely suffer a fall from plenty to beggary, they may soon expect another and a worse from that to slavery. That that has always been the case. It will. There's nothing special about us anymore, y'all. There may have been a time where there was something special about us, that we really loved liberty. That the sun is set on that. We have to look at history. We have to learn our fathers. The reason we even know this stuff is because it was so often quoted by our founding fathers. The reason we're able to have podcasts is because our founding fathers did more than shake their fists at George the Third. Right? That's why. But you read any of these guys and they say what? They say effeminacy, right? That's one of the big ones. You start ratting out your neighbor. You care more about comfort than you do about liberty. All of these things. And then and then you stop caring about, what do they say right there? They're like, if this mighty destructive guilt finds impunity, nothing remains but that every villain of a daring and avaricious spirit will grow into a great rogue in order to be a great man. If I go out and I kill someone, I'm a murderer and everybody looks down on me and they'll talk to my neighbors. Yeah, he was weird. We didn't know what to think of him. And I go to prison and everybody hates me and I might have my life taken by the state. But you put a uniform on me and I sit in the desert in Nevada with a joystick and I use a flying robot to kill 20 Yemenis at a wedding. I'm a hero. Thank you for your service. Thank you for protecting freedom. Well, I'm calling BS on that now.
right.
You're a hero. You're a great man if you can just do any of this villainous, evil thing. If you can get away with it, you'll be a great man. You'll be written in history books as someone great who saved us, who defended our liberty. Ain't no one defended liberty since 1815 in this country. Period. And don't come at me because my dad served 25 years in the Army. Okay? But he'd be the first one to tell you. He went to Vietnam 3 tours. He went to Desert Storm. He never spent a day of his life defending our liberty.
Right.
So this nonsense is just like, hey, that's a way for a rogue to become a great man. You know what? It's like you see someone like Lindsey Graham.
Oh man.
I mean, you talk about depravity.
Yeah.
Just Google Lindsey Graham's depravity. And then he never met a brown person he didn't want to blow up. Right? Al Qaeda, kill them all, let God sort them out. The Taliban, the Yemenis. I mean, he even said that we should have sent a drone to kill Edward Snowden in the Senate. He stood up in the Senate and said we should send a drone to execute him for daring to reveal that the government was unconstitutionally and illegally making electronic surveillance of every American without a
See,
warrant.
that's the thing. Like, if anybody who thinks the government or the state or any of its appendices are there to protect you, see how much they protect you. Meaning, let's say you do get robbed. Let's say harm does come to you. How quickly does somebody come and help you with that? Versus you embarrass them by telling them that you lied us into war. You had the gall to go to bypass um, the state um, voices and tell people how uh, that the spying that was supposed to be done on our enemies actually be done towards us 100%. See how quickly that they turn on those people, and compared to protecting our liberty, protecting the that's the state apparatus, the FBI, the CIA, the DOD, and every other agency there to protect the people is there to protect the state, the
Privileges of the elite.
privileges of the elite, and to make sure that the people that the money continues to get funded into the
Make
right
sure,
places.
make sure that none of those people are ever punished for their crimes. And how do
Never.
they do it? Just like they say in this letter number 3,
Yep.
pay them off. Make them partners in the crime.
That's right.
Make them part, and then they do worse to us. They make it seem noble.
Right.
Voting, I got a sticker. I'm gonna make my Facebook. I'm gonna put a frame on my Facebook. I voted. I care about liberty.
I'm gonna get a sticker that says I voted harder than you.
Yeah, vote harder, daddy. You know what I mean? That's who we are. And so I see this part where he's like, so what do I have before my eyes? And I think about, man, what do I have before my eyes? He says, a brave and an honest people, lovers of trade and industry, free of their money and well deserving of the legislature, passionate for liberty and haters of chains. That's who we used to be. That's our founding fathers, right there to a T. That's who we used to be. Who are we now? Deluded, drained of our money, abused beyond patience, beyond expression, that swagger in the plunder of their country. I voted, or I'm going to put up a meme of Joe Biden. You're swaggering in the plunder. You don't want to stop the plunder. You're just begging the plunderer to be kinder. And then you just go along with it because you're credulous. You believe what you're told. You're deluded. And they count on that delusion. And that's why we exist. Mike and I, this podcast exists to break through that delusion, to pierce that veil that they have over your eyes and say, you don't have to believe this nonsense. Our fathers didn't believe this nonsense. The Declaration of Independence, the Constitution, do not suborn or support this kind of tyranny, and we, the people, have the ultimate, absolute, unqualified right to dispose of those who destroy and impoverish us, period, with no excuse. Because it is my belief, I won't speak for Mike, but I will say I believe that if you're an American and you are blessed by God, who it says in the scriptures knows the habitation of his people, he knew where he was sending you. If you're an American and you were sent to this country at a time where you could vote for your leaders, or at least theoretically vote for your leaders, I have got to believe that there will come a day when you're sitting with the Savior and he asks you to account for all the times you voted for evil, evil that you so pleasantly described as the lesser of the two evils. He will hold you to account. Why did you not try, at least try, to oppose this tyranny that supplanted me from being the king of America? Why did you do that? What was it that our enemy offered you that persuaded you to betray me? How many pieces of silver were you given to betray the Savior?
I'll give a big amen to that, and I will add that. Not that I can add much to that. That's pretty powerful stuff. But I do want to say, like, why are we doing this podcast? Why do we think this podcast is important? Number one, because it is important for us. We feel it's important that this message gets out, that we are at least doing our part to protect and maintain and retain and regain our liberty. And number two, the really good news, and I do think this is good news.
Mm-hmm.
The good news is it doesn't take a majority, it takes an alternative. It takes a large enough alternative. And I know there are people out there that will hear this, and maybe you're hearing this for the first time, and you're gonna be thinking, what in the world are these guys talking? But something in your heart is going to spark, and something in your mind is going to open up, and your eyes are going to see what we're talking about. That this isn't some crazy, like, we're not talking about in fact, I'm going to say it this way: we are talking about a conspiracy theory, the ultimate conspiracy theory, where the prince of this world, the devil, is conspiring against you and your freedom.
And his co-conspirators, his fleshy, mortal co-conspirators know who their master is. You've got to stop thinking that these are just a bunch of bumbling idiots or socialists who are misguided and misled. And only if we could vote them out that there'd be a new crop and we'd vote ourselves into freedom. No one in the history of the world ever voted themselves out of tyranny and into freedom. Never. But you wouldn't know that because we've been kept for over 100 years now from studying real history. So you wouldn't know that that's never happened in the history of mankind. There's never been a time when you could vote tyrants. The tyrants just can go, well, I didn't get the votes this time.
Right.
Man, I was about to steal some more money and start some more wars, but they voted me out of office.
Right.
It's never happened. And it never will happen. Right? You have got to realize that this is a purposeful, planned attack perpetrated by the prince of this world and those who knowingly serve him. And it is your obligation to serve he who is the rightful king of this land, to serve him in overthrowing this unjust, unholy power that is depriving us every day. And there's no one who watches this that isn't being deprived of life, liberty, or property right now. None of you, every one of you. And if you give me that BS line about this is the price we pay for civilization, don't ever watch this again. I don't have time to argue with that kind of ignorance. If this is civilization, I don't want it. If waking up every day to how many Yemenis we've murdered on behalf of the Saudi prince, or how much stolen money we've sent to European oligarchs, if that's our I don't want that kind of civilization. Give me back my money and I'll go be uncivilized. Because that ain't what I call civilization. But you got to realize that this is a real war that we're in. And you've got to choose sides, right? And whichever side you think is going to win, remember that side, there'll be recriminations for those who oppose them and fought against them. And this isn't a call to violence. This is a call to virtue. This is a call for justice. This is a call to quit being deluded, quit being so credulous, to quit playing the game according to their rules. Throw the mitt down, walk away from the diamond where they've changed the rules, where they're rigging the game from the beginning, and realize that, hey, there's a lot of us, a lot more of us than there are of them, and we can overcome this. But there is no liberty without virtue. We can't do it unless we get ourselves squared away, and unless we realize that to topple these tyrants is not only our right, but is our duty to do so if we really believe that there is a God and that he wants us to be free. I, the Lord God, made you free, and you are free indeed. Nevertheless, when the wicked rule, the people mourn. And we're all mourning, but it's time to wipe those tears. It's time to wipe the tears, stand up, dust yourself off, and acquit yourselves like men. Show people that they are men and they will act like men. We're here to show you that you don't have to be a slave. You can walk off the plantation and then we can burn the damn plantation to the ground.
Burn it down. Let's return to tradition, brother.
Let's do it.
Let's do it.
It ain't a thing.
See you guys next time.
Yep.